uh, RDBMS in MyBatis. Now we are focusing on RDBMS, a database management system, DBMS, based on the relational model. Here you can see how does it work. The MyBatis data mapper framework will help you to significantly reduce the amount of Java code that you normally need to access the relational database. MyBatis simply maps the Java beans to SQL statement using a very simple XML descriptor. Simplicity is the key advantage of MyBatis over other frameworks and object-oriented mapping tools. To use MyBatis Java Mapper, you need to be familiar with Java Beans, XML, and SQL. There's very little else to learn, and there's no complex scheme required to join tables to execute complex queries. MyBatis Data Mapper API allows programmers to easily map Java Beans object to prepared statements, parameters, prepared statement parameters, and result sets. Philosophy behind the data mapper is simple. Provide a simple framework to provide 80% of JDBC functionality using 20% of the code. This is how does it work. Data mapper provide a very simple framework for using XML descriptors to map Java beans, map implementations, and primitive wrappers using string, integer, etc., and even XML documents to an SQL statement. Following is the high-level description of the lifecycle. Provide an object as a parameter, either a Java bean, map, or primitive wrapper. The parameter objects will be used to set input values for the update statement or where close values in a query, etc. Execute the map statement. This step is where the magic happens. The data mapper framework will create a prepared statement instance, set any parameters using the provided parameter object, execute the statement, and build a result object from the result set. In case of the update, the number of rows affected is returned. In case of a query, single object or collection of objects is returned. Like parameters, return objects can be a Java bean, a map, or a primitive type wrapper, or XML. Here you can see an example code here using Java ORM with PostgreSQL. The named file is mybatis-config.xml here. Here you can see the driver value org.postgresql.driver here, and URL is here. Here the as an example 2, we can consider this one. The environment element define how the environment is configured. Notice the key sections here. The default environment ID, for example, default equal development. The environment ID for each environment defined. So this is the default environment ID, and this is the environment ID for each environment defined. The transactional the transaction manager configuration, type equal JDBC here. Data source configuration, type equal pooled. Default environment and the environment IDs are self explanatory. Name them whatever you like, just make sure the default matches one of them. Transaction manager. There are two transaction manager types, that is JDBC and managed, that are included with MyBatis. Here JDBC, this configuration simply makes use of JDBC commit and rollback facilities directly. It relies on the connection retrieved from the data source to manage the scope of the transaction. Here you can see the data source. The data source element configures the source of JDBC connection object using the standard JDBC data source interface. Most MyBatis applications will configure the data source as an however, it is not required to there are three built-in data source types: unpooled, pooled, and JNDI. Here is pooled. This implementation of data source pools JDBC connection objects to avoid the initial connection and authentication time required to create a new connection instance. This is the popular approach for concurrent web applications to achieve the fastest response. Here you can see driver property name. This is the fully qualified Java class of the JDBC driver, not of the data source class if your driver includes one. URL, this is the JDBC URL for your database instance. Username, the database username to log in with. Password, the database password to log in with. This is a sample SQL map.config for .NET web application. Place this file in same directory as web.config. Here you can see database, provider name, SQL server 1.1, data source name, npet shop, connection string here, password here, data source here, database here. As an exception example, we can consider this: org.apache.ibatis.exceptions, persistent exception, error querying database, cause, java.sql.sql syntax error exception, etc. As an error example, we can consider this: you have an error in your SQL syntax. Check the manual that correspond to your MySQL server version for the right syntax to use near create temporary table temp underscore roll underscore id int insert into temp underscore roll underscore id va at line 2. Now this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for watching it.